You're watching the Eternal Tournament Series.
Because his whole point of PanHanGo's deck is to just draw a bunch of cards with Wisdom of the Elders, Chalice, and Jail of the Tempest.
Yeah, we got PanHanGo on this TJP Chalice deck, which essentially is just going to be a TJP variant that's playing a lot more of the low-to-the-ground units like the Marison's Disciple, Lumen Defender, Scorpion Wasp, Amber Acolyte. A lot of the cards that you would find in there anyway, but you're going to be using Crystalline Chalice to go ahead and buff them up and draw some cards off it. So it's a pretty interesting strategy, one that I haven't been here in a little bit, but I don't think we've seen a lot of in the tournament series. So we'll see if it pays off for PanHanGo.
Yeah, this is a pretty new deck. It's been popping up on ladder a lot recently, but I do not believe we've seen it really in the Eternal Tournament series yet. So it'll be interesting to see how things do go as we move into Game 1.
Yeah, moving into Game 1 right here. We got ExKirby on the draw, and man, what a draw it is. Ooh, actually got a mulligan that one back. Very interesting there. I guess he didn't have, wasn't able to activate the champion in either way.
I wouldn't be surprised if ExKirby mulliganed it because it didn't have Scrap Tank.
Yeah, that is true. It is ExKirby, so what are you going to expect? He got a very good mulligan hand, though. Same for PanHanGo. He's got a pretty reasonable hand here. Going to have the Seek Power, the Ephemeral Wisp, and the Amber Acolyte to curve out his early turns.
Yeah, PanHanGo has just little, like all the random stuff you're like looking to play early in the game. Just all the little creatures to develop your draws. And ExKirby does have the Black Iron Manacles you can play on 4. So that is going to inhibit the effectiveness of cards like Chalice and even Amber Acolyte.
Yeah, definitely. And ExKirby here taking a little bit of a gamble, going to go ahead and grab the Black Iron Manacles off of the Quarry, guaranteeing that he can play that one next turn, but leaving himself in a bit of a bind over the next 2 draw steps if he can't find another power. Recognizing, though, in his opinion, that the Black Iron Manacles is the way he's going to be winning this game. So electing to get one down early, and we'll see if that incremental damage will just knock PanHanGo down very quickly.
Yeah, and now Light the Fuse has been found by ExKirby, so that's another fun card that actually is probably going to come up in this matchup. And it's good for PanHanGo that he does have things like Combat Healer that should do a good job of helping him out here. And it'll mainly rely upon whether or not ExKirby can really put the pressure on PanHanGo, or if the Black Iron Manacles is enough to really blunt PanHanGo's inevitability that he would otherwise have.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting matchup here. I would definitely say that ExKirby's strategy would work, very, very well against PanHanGo's style of deck, although PanHanGo does have the Comber Healer and the Lumen Defenders to, hold off those attacks. I mean, Lumen Defender coming down on turn 5, giving you 5 health back is actually pretty good for him here. And PanHanGo does have some reasonable threats of his own in cards like the Great Parliament. I mean, this is going to be hard for ExKirby to deal with, especially looking at his hand currently.
Yeah, this is good for PanHanGo. He does need to play some proactive stuff because that Black Iron Manacles now is going to be a second one. So that is a clock that he needs to deal with. And if he's able to counter pressure ExKirby, it will be. It's a good way to overcome just this ticking damage that he may not otherwise be able to deal with.
Yeah, certainly so. We do see ExKirby go ahead and opt for the Statuary Maiden instead of the Manacles, likely trying to soak up some damage here, and wants to get that down before he gets both of these torches off on the following turn. That way he can also pick up a Cudgel to go with it and hopefully create a pretty powerful attacker. See, PanHanGo is going to be able to stymie that, though, with his Lumen Defender coming down, that ExKirby is not going to have an answer to immediately. It's going to play defense pretty well for him.
Yeah, and these life gain creatures are going to be a big deal, both Lumen Defender and Combre Healer, really blunting the damage done by the Black Iron Manacles, giving PanHanGo the time to either implement his game plan or actually have this little owl that could go the distance.
Yeah, interesting. We see ExKirby pick up a third Black Iron Manacles, and with PanHanGo's hand looking almost entirely like it's full of draw, this is going to be interesting as we move on. You know, if PanHanGo can't pick up anything but power and draw, there's a situation where a couple of these monocles are going to come down, and PanHanGo is going to find himself in a situation where he's having to kill himself to keep his game going.
Yeah, and ExKirby did take that turn to double torch the. Oh, and there's a firebomb. So the plan is coming together. But yeah, ExKirby took off a turn to deal with the owl, so these other Black Iron Manacles are not dealing damage for this wisdom. So he's losing a little bit of value, but he's probably going to spend the next 2 turns deploying them, and it's just going to be a lot for PanHanGo to overcome. He needs to start attacking.
Yeah, it certainly does, and he does go ahead and get in with the Lumen Defender, although 19-turn clock is not really the position you want to be in this matchup. ExKirby going ahead and dropping another Manacle down. PanHanGo picking up a Harsh Rule. Unfortunately, that's going to be a dead card for him in the matchup since he is going to be the aggressor, and it's unlikely with ExKirby on a control-style deck that we're going to see many units coming down for him outside of possibly a Torrent of Spiders. Torrent of Spiders is just going to be playing defense in this matchup, though, so PanHanGo not going to be in a rush to clear that one away.
And the second firebomb drawn by PanHanGo, so the plan is working for ExKirby, and this is the matchup for it. This is perfect. The 8 damage from the Manacles just happened, and here's the third Manacles. It's happening.
Yeah, this is absolutely insane. I mean, there's just nothing right now that PanHanGo can do about it. It looks like ExKirby is really just implemented a strategy perfectly. We see PanHanGo obviously having picked up another Lumen Defender, able to gain himself some health, but at the same time, it's just he doesn't have a ton going on here, and it's kind of unfortunate.
PanHanGo literally can't cast the Channel the Tempest because he'll just die. It deals 12 to him.
Yeah, and that's really unfortunate for PanHanGo. As we talked about at the top of the matchup, a lot of PanHanGo's deck is built around, drawing a bunch of cards and having these really great effects, being able to refill your hand. And we see PanHanGo just stuck in this situation where he's essentially playing just with a handful of dead cards, and it looks like this matchup is very likely going to go to ExKirby. At this rate, I don't see a way necessarily out of this for PanHanGo at this point.
Yeah, ExKirby is essentially showing up pre-sideboarded for this matchup because PanHanGo's deck is just trying to sit back, draw cards. He has all these good creatures that are good defending, not attacking. So the way you would deal with ExKirby's deck is by putting him under pressure, making it so the inevitability of the Manacles don't matter. But given how this game has played out, PanHanGo isn't able to do that, or at least he's starting to try now. But it's just a really big uphill battle.
Yeah, this is going to be a very rough one for PanHanGo. And with ExKirby just, go ahead and dropping another Spider down. He's got just one more blocker here. It's going to be able to hold PanHanGo off. And yeah, unfortunately for PanHanGo, there's just not a lot his deck does from this situation. Definitely not when you're staring down 2 deadly blockers. They're going to hold it off quite well.
Yeah, and the Dire Fang Spider's doing work. The Statuary Maiden has been the biggest problem because he can't, like, we were at the point where if PanHanGo could, he would just, like, start trading stuff in just to get some amount of damage. But none of his cards can attack into the 2/4 Death Touch, like, remotely profitably. So he's just stuck. He can't do anything. Like, the Harsh Roll's dead, the Channel Tempest is dead, the Wasp doesn't do anything because ExKirby's never attacking, and the Vanquish doesn't have a legal target. Like, every card in his hand doesn't do anything.
Yeah, and that really is just unfortunately where PanHanGo finds himself, looking very much like ExKirby going to take this one down. I mean, PanHanGo goes to 6 at the end of his turn. That's assuming, he doesn't draw any other cards. Just going to go for a desperate A space here. Not really going to accomplish anything, though. Honestly, just giving more favor over to PanHanGo, in my opinion. But, he's in a situation where there's not really much he can do, so he's just trying to at least jam through some amount of damage.
There is actually, so PanHanGo, if the Channel Tempest is somehow lethal, like if he can force chip through damage and have a lethal Channel Tempest, it will kill ExKirby because the damage from the Manacles is on the end of turn. So there's kind of a way to do this, but as we see the removal spell in the Wasp here, ExKirby will attack with a comically large with Statuary Maiden, and that will be game 1. Oh no, he has the Wasp in front.
Yeah, with the Wasp in hand, actually, the scenario you just presented might have just occurred. Actually, no. I think, unfortunately, PanHanGo is going to be 1 damage off, it looks like, or possibly 2 damage off. Channel of the Tempest able to hit for, I think, 6 here.
He doesn't have another turn, though. He doesn't need to do it this turn. The Manacle's only dealing 3 to him, so he can play this bird and pass the turn.
Oh, wow, yeah. ExKirby kind of making a big misstep here, trying to jam through, gets punished by the Wasp, and actually, yeah, it looks like this is going to cost him the game here. Yeah, PanHanGo is just going to be able to force in a lethal attack here, and very unfortunate for ExKirby, a matchup that it seemed like he was so far ahead in. Unfortunately, falling here at the end due to, a little bit of a careless attack there.
Yeah, he did have the inevitability from the Manacles. There wasn't a lot of a reason to attack. We do have deck lists. You do have your opponents playing Wasp, so there certainly are ways that can go wrong. But mainly, ExKirby not drawing really anything other than the Manacles, as powerful as Manacles are, just wasn't able to overcome, just even like the middling slew of creatures that PanHanGo presented.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are going to take a look at the players' sideboarding currently. You're going to see what we're going to shift around. PanHanGo right now actually cutting Lumen Defender. Very interesting decision out of him. I'm curious to see what card he feels necessary to bring in over Lumen Defender. I'm kind of sitting in the camp where I think Lumen Defender is actually doing a ton of work in this matchup, even if it really is just put down a 1/5 that can swing every turn and gain yourself 5 life back.
It's certainly interesting because as we saw that game, the best way to deal with what ExKirby is doing is by putting pressure on him and taking away the inevitability of things like Black Iron Manacles, Light Diffuse. So even though Lumen Defender gains life, it doesn't actually further that game plan. So if you do have additional threats, and as we see in the sideboard, PanHanGo does have access to Sandstorm Titan and Mirror Season's Disciple, which do actually give you the ability to go on offense a bit. I could certainly see that becoming a bit defensible.
Yeah, this is certainly true. He does get a lot more aggressive here with him putting in things like the extra copies of the Mirror Season's Disciple and the Sandstorm Titan. On the other side of the board, ExKirby, some interesting considerations out of him as to what will be coming into his sideboard. He doesn't have a ton of cards he'd be bringing in for this matchup. If anything, possibly a couple copies of Charchain Flail and maybe some Flame Blast to give him a little bit of reach, but not a ton other than that coming in, really. Furnace Mage is actually decent here since it knocks off the Chalice.
It's interesting because, do you actually want to kill your opponent's Chalice? It's your Black Iron Manacles already shut that down a lot. Normally things like Sabotage and First Mage would be very good in this matchup because they deal with Channel of the Tempest, the card draw, Chalice, Great Parliament, all that stuff. But I think you still do want some number, but you are kind of relying upon, you have cards that already shut those off. So maybe you just overload on those and make sure their Chalice and Channel never gets value. But there is diminished return of having things that all target the same card.
Yeah, absolutely. We do see Decay coming in for PanHanGo. Going to try and take care of the Monocles that way. Will hopefully alleviate some of the damage there. Considering what he's going to take out, taking out some Ephemeral Wisp makes sense, as you had said. He's looking to be on that aggressive game plan, not a defensive one. So taking out some of the cards that force these longer games and let him stall out more against some of the bigger decks, and just trying to get lower to the ground.
Yeah, we also see the Decays come in on the side of PanHanGo to deal with the Black Iron Manacles. It's a very problematic card. I'm surprised to see all 4 Harsh Rules still in on the side of PanHanGo. There are certainly creatures in ExKirby's deck, the Scrap Tanks through the past, Statuary Maiden, but I think in general, you're going to want to be the one ahead on board, and if the game is going the way you want it, you're going to be ahead on board. So I don't love all 4 Channel the Tempest. If he's struggling for cuts, that'd probably be the first thing I'd go to, but having more than 0 is probably fine.
Yeah, probably looking for a sweet spot around 2 of them. It was definitely a very weird draw for ExKirby, since ExKirby actually does have a lot of very strong units in his deck. It just never came down to him having units. It was all about this monocle strategy. And another interesting hand for ExKirby. Looks like he's going to be playing a lot of defense and relying on these Black Iron Monocles again. PanHanGo on the other side of the table, though, not a ton of action going on himself. He does have the Decay, though, which will be important here.
Yeah, being able to take the clock from that Black Iron Manacles is certainly going to be a big deal. It'll allow him to just like stall out, play his random dudes, do his game plan. But he does need to muster some form of proactivity eventually, especially now that there's a second Black Iron Manacles.
Yep, and here we see the manacles coming down, and PanHanGo picking up some form of interactivity in that form of Marison's Disciple, but unfortunately doesn't have the power currently to play it. We're going to see if he can hit it on his draw step. Otherwise, this might start to get a little bit awkward here.
Yeah, this certainly is awkward because both of the plays PanHanGo wanted to do this turn involve drawing additional cards. The manacles will get a bit more value. You still do it; it's just extra damage, but it's the process is starting.
Yeah, absolutely. And PanHanGo now going to have to take off his next turn to be able to drop this Decay here. Otherwise, he will be taking a ton of damage over the next few turns. I mean, 2 damage doesn't seem like a lot, but when it starts stacking up in these early turns, and ExKirby does have threats and reach.
And actually, I do like playing this Mercy Disciple here. You're just taking 2 this turn from the manacles. You're essentially only taking additional 1 by waiting. You do need to destroy these eventually, but I do like getting the creatures on board first, so you actually have initiative. And now next turn, PanHanGo could like Permafrost, Decay. He has multiple spells to do.
Yeah, certainly we'll have ways to interact here. We're going to see PanHanGo dropping the Permafrost and finally, using that Decay, taking care of one of the manacles. He's going to start attacking in the meantime and providing himself a quicker clock on ExKirby. So we'll see what ExKirby picks up here. He still does have 2 removal spells in hand, although these are not the premium targets you really want to be throwing them at.
And this is certainly one of the strengths of the Chalice deck, is most of the creatures it is presenting are pretty bad targets for most spot removal spells. We did see that PanHanGo did sideboard in the Sandstorm Titan, which is going to allow Kirby to use one of these 2 spells efficiently. But in general, all of the creatures in PanHanGo's deck are just random value creatures that he can then target with Chalice.
Yeah, absolutely. And ExKirby going to be loving this here, being able to take care of that Sandstorm Titan. Do you see a Champion of Chaos coming down, which is looking pretty sweet for him, except for PanHanGo has the Vanquish and the Permafrost in hand. So, and yeah, PanHanGo at 22 life, very comfortable to just sit here and accept that he's going to take a little bit of damage. He's going to take 3 damage this turn, but not a big deal to him currently. Not when he's racing him down 4 damage at a time.
And this certainly appears to be one of the weaknesses of ExKirby's deck, is one of the only real sources of damage to face is the Black Iron Manacles. So you'll frequently find yourself in games like we saw in Game 1 and might see here, where Black Iron Manacles do like 20 damage, but 20 is not 25. And he doesn't really have another way to like close that gap. He doesn't really have other burn in his deck. So when you draw these removal spells and just sit on your heels, Black Iron Manacles is ticking, but it's not outpacing what your opponent's doing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's kind of how this matchup works as well. Since you touched on that, Black Iron Manacles will do 25 damage, but if your opponent's not drawing a ton of cards and you only have a single one down, that will take, 25 turns sometimes. And in this case, PanHanGo is accelerating it a little bit here, but he's also finding a lot of threats to go ahead and jam down, ciphering through a lot of the trash in his deck. And even just these two power units here have provided him so much damage up to this point that it really has put ExKirby on the back foot in this matchup.
Yeah, just the little tutus that could just keep on jamming. One has to trade with the spider. We see the next one coming down. Permafrost to deal with a potential blocker. This Death Strike's probably going to have to hit a 3/3 at some point.
Yeah, it absolutely will. We're going to see this Death Strike come down undoubtedly here on this Sandstalker. And it's very interesting because there is a situation where ExKirby can still win this matchup. Like, he doesn't need a lot to go his way here, but he does need something. And picking up these power every single turn is just not where he wants to be. There's a situation with, like, let's say a scrap tank coming down. I mean, PanHanGo's hand is pretty empty as well. Anything that can take care of both of these threats here would be good for ExKirby, but unfortunately picking up only a single target removal spell is not going to be enough here. We are going to see ExKirby unfortunately fall down here at the end, 0-2 going to PanHanGo.
Yeah, unfortunately, ExKirby's memes will remain dreams. Will come up short here with it. Is very interesting Manacles deck, which I think he got kind of the dream matchup. Like, that's the deck that just keeps drawing a bunch of cards every turn. Like, he got to Data Channel the Tempest in game 1 because of his Black Iron Manacles. It's certainly a good spot, but I do think that the deck really lacks closing power. The damage, like we said, from Black Iron Manacles doesn't really matter unless you can close the full gap, and there really aren't complementary burn spells to help do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the matchup he was looking for, but unfortunately just not quite getting there. That is kind of the weakness of the control style decks, especially a control style deck such as the Scrap Tank version we just saw ExKirby playing. It is very, very reliant on a few things going right, and unfortunately for ExKirby, they're just drawing a lot of power and not drawing a lot of the cards that he wanted to see there. The namesake of the deck, specifically Scrap Tank, would have actually been quite good there at the end. Once you get the Black Iron Manacles down, yes, they are generally your win condition, but once they come down, you have to have other things going for you. You can't just be relying on the Black Iron Manacles because, as we saw in that game, PanHanGo only had to jam down two power units, and all of a sudden the clock was heavily in his favor.
Yeah, and all you need is for, like, I guess the plan is to blunt your opponent's proactivity to the point where the Black Iron Manacles outpaces it. But when you're unable to do that and you just have nothing to complement the Black Iron Manacles, then you're just going to, like, flounder and die to some 2-1s, as we did see there.
Yeah, quite unfortunate. I mean, good on ExKirby for bringing such a cool deck, and I would have definitely liked to see him, at least take one game, if not the series, but, not quite happening for him there. PanHanGo having a really interesting deck as well, though. I do like this TJP Chalice style deck, and I have a feeling that, not having seen it in action a lot, it probably has a pretty good matchup against a lot of the bigger style decks. I'd be curious to see how this deck interacts with Big Combry, since I have a feeling Big Combry is still quite a force to be reckoned with at this point in the game.
Yeah, I've actually played the matchup a few times, and Big Combray does go over the top of it. Although the Chalice deck does certainly have draws where if they have Chalice in play, they get value, they can harsh rule you at key times, and will be able to overcome it. So there is interplay. I do think Big Combray is favored, but there certainly is a lot of inevitability provided from the Chalice deck, even though it is generally worse than the inevitability provided by Big Combray.
Yeah, Big Combray is just such a titan right now, and it has proven that it is a very, very solid deck, undoubtedly. I do love TJP style decks, though. I do have to say, this deck is much less of a control style deck than some TJP decks we've seen, but it does have very controlling elements. I mean, I guess that is kind of the flavor of TJP as an archetype. You're always going to have some of those controlling elements. Vanquish, Permafrost, Desert Marshal, all very, very solid cards. You get Scorpion, Wasp, and Combray Healers into the mix, and you can really stall out some of these games. And we also saw PanHanGo, flipping it around and able to go aggressive there. So definitely an impressive run. Looks like in just a moment, though, we're going to be jumping into our backup match. We're going to have Moosh on TJP Chalice as well, and he's going to be up against Mulligan, who's on Elysian mid-range.
Yeah, we have certainly seen an uptick in the Time to Primal Chalice deck on ladder the last week. I've seen it a lot while just playing the game. And I guess people are now converting that to the Eternal Tournament Series, so we are going to see a lot of it. The Elysian Midrange deck is a deck that has had a lot of success in previous weeks, been starting to become a mainstay of the tournament, something we see pretty frequently. Just a bunch of good midrange creatures, or so, usually just trying to win creature combat. So I do think that this would favor the Chalice deck because they do have harsh rules. They are able to provide blockers that trade with fair amount of the Elysian Midrange deck's threats. If the midrange deck comes out of the gates pretty fast, with Dawnwalkers and all of their big creatures, I do see a way that they can run over the Chalice deck, but I do think the Chalice deck has a good amount of game in the matchup.
Yeah, we do see some very, very interesting inclusions here. Sorry, this is the wrong deck. We got a couple people bring Elysian mid-range. Let's take a look at Mulligan's and see if his is as interesting. He's actually got a more traditional version of the deck. He is playing 3 copies of Slow in the main board, as well as 3 Praxis Displacers. And I am a huge fan of Praxis Displacer in these Elysian mid-range decks, or in a Shiver Pack style deck. I think I think Praxis Displacer has a huge place in the Elysian mid-range style of decks, and it can provide so much work in a deck that really is relying on winning the game on the back of its tempo.
Yeah, and there is the Slow and the Praxis Placer are both potentially telegraphing a lot more tempo-oriented build, or at least a lot more tempo-oriented game plan. Slow is a card that is incredibly powerful if you are pressuring your opponent to the point where they can't get enough mana to eventually cast it again later, whatever the double cost may be. Usually when you double a 4 or a 5, it becomes virtually uncastable for most people, but you still need to be proactive, still need to be have the ability to just run over your opponent. And in situations where you can turn Slow into just a straight up discard spell, it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, it can be very devastating. On the other side of the table, we see Moosh playing a very similar TJP style deck to the one we just saw. Based on what I'm seeing, nothing too interesting going on here. No Ephemeral Wisps included in this version, though. And as somebody who's been seeing a ton of this deck on the ladder, Truedawn, I'm curious to hear what your opinion is about the difference between the Ephemeral Wisp style of Chalice deck and the version that does not include.
The Ephemeral Wisp build is obviously a little bit more weak to silence traditionally. So if you look at, for example, Mochi's deck, it does not really have cards that are good silence targets. They're just rando creatures. So deading your opponent's silence does matter. So you just get to play things like Flair's Favorite, Temple Scribe, which are just good cards, and they still do the same stuff in regards to Chalice. And even though Ephemeral Wisp has a higher ceiling, it can keep going back. You can just have this 4/5 that's unkillable. When they do, most decks do run silence, and if you're just turning it on, if there's no other target, then you're just not going to get value for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will see how that matchup turns out. Unfortunately, it looks like we are having some technical difficulties right now. So we're gonna go ahead and take a short break, everybody, while round 1 finishes up. We'll go ahead and leave you with Moosh was up 1-0 in that series, so looks like he's in a good position. We'll see if the TJP Chalice deck can close it out. But for the moment, that's what we're going to do. Yeah, sorry. Unfortunately, guys, we just can't get the stream up. So we're going to take a very short break as round 1 concludes and bring you full coverage of round 2 in just a few moments.